So I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. As you could tell, we had a lot of people with a lot of questions and points they wanted to make about their experiences at school. And so my first question is, what is your biggest takeaway from the overall conversation tonight? I'll start with you, Rebekah, and then we'll go Robin and Courtney, which is not alphabetical, but
Yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway is one that I've kind of been picking up on in a lot of different avenues, and it's that teachers and staff feel like their voices are not being heard, and that what's happening to them isn't being represented in the media and in the overall discussion about opening schools.
What I heard, and I've heard this over and over again, is that school staff, there's a fear factor in speaking up. They're really not sure if there will be repercussions if they speak up. Somebody wrote in the chat that they have recently got in trouble for bringing up issues around the ventilation system in their antiquated school. And this I've heard over and over again. How do we get our voice out there? Am I going to get in trouble? What do I need to do? How do you get to speak up and you don't seem to get in trouble? And so, we've reached this place of true fear for repercussions and people losing their jobs. And it's a sad place to be right now in the middle of a pandemic.
I think I'm just going to echo what everyone else is saying. The need for transparency, and the fear of losing your position that you work so hard and love, just because you're speaking out about something that's affecting you personally or as a whole.
thank you. And for me, as a teacher at a school, just being more mindful when we're talking about school and teachers and students to also include in that conversation every single time everyone at the school, nurses, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, people who work in the cafeteria, and the list goes on and on. It's not just teachers and students. There's so many other people who make up a student body, a school community. So we need to really, to me, what resonated and I'm going to take to other teachers is we need to start using the term school staff and not just teachers. And I feel really passionate about that. So yeah. And so my other question is, what stories, what angles do you want the media to start covering when discussing schools during COVID? We'll go Courtney, Robin, and Rebekah.
I would just love for the media to focus on what everyday life is like inside of the school. Not just what the fairy tale makeup is, but what's the reality of what's happening inside of the school.
Thank you. Robin?
Yeah, I really want the media to focus on the school safety issue. We had spoken before that there's this segment of our country who have been impacted by gun violence. And, there is an overlap between the feeling safe and being safe are two very different things. And prior to COVID, schools were not necessarily the safest place to be. We've had all of these issues with, school shootings. Even today, I could not believe this. There was an article posted in a remote learning situation. The students had to do active shooter drills. They were home, remote, and doing active shooter drills. The mom posted a picture of her child under the desk at home, like under the kitchen table. So to me, the real discussion about school safety has to include COVID, and it has to include gun violence. And what does that mean for our school communities? So that's one issue. I could list 10 issues I wish the media would cover around schools, because I don't, when I've been contacted by the media to do stories, you know, they want the video, they want to see something in action. But to get to the meat of really what the issues are, we need to talk about grief. We need to talk about trauma. We need to talk about what is going to be happening for our school communities when we reopen. What does it mean when you open and you close and you open and you close? What is that doing to the relationships at school? What is that doing to, you know, our comfort level? All of that is adding to this whole feeling of unsafe in our school communities too.
Thank you. Rebekah?
So this might be somewhat ironic coming from a person who's made a living tracking numbers, but more than anything, I'd like to see more depth in reporting. So not just looking at those numbers, looking at the lives that are impacted, the lifestyle changes that people have been forced to make because of this. And like Courtney said, what is day-to-day life actually like? How much time are teachers spending on quarantine? That's not something that we're able to track because it's not tracked. You know, the federal government has completely dropped the ball. We hope that Biden will do what I'm doing, you know, with a whole staff, but we don't know that. And I really just wish that there was more people in those numbers when they're being reported. And of course, I want the numbers reported right. That's important, but numbers are one part of this picture. And I wish that there would be a more of an understanding and more depth in how we look at this situation, because it's truly unprecedented.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree too. I mean, I'm a social studies teacher, so it's kind of on brand for me to agree with. I mean, we look at numbers and human beings and interactions, and other things. But I agree. I think that the human stories behind the numbers are so important, because the human brain can't fathom 300,000, 400,000. And I don't want to keep going up with the numbers, but they're unfortunately looking like they will. And I think that for every number, there needs to be a story. Maybe not for every number, but for, 10 numbers, 20 numbers, because otherwise we lose those stories, and we lose the human effect, the human impact. So I agree. So my next question is, I'm just going to ask this question. It's the question that everyone wants to ask, and everyone wants to answer too. Are schools safe? And for Courtney, do you feel safe? So
I think about this a lot, because the work, the effort, the time, the commitment that school staff are taking to keep everybody safe at school, and they're doing a tremendous job. The problem is when the last bell rings and everybody piles into cars and goes to parties, and the weekend, and then Halloween comes, and it's life. The problem is what happens in the community, and what happens in the community absolutely impacts school. School is not bubble wrapped and separated from the rest of the world. And I think that's the misconception. So schools they're doing an incredible job spending an inordinate amount of money to get supplies, to try to keep everyone safe, to do the best that they can to create social distancing and mask wearing and all of these, gymnastics to keep everyone safe. And then all bets are off, especially if families are believing this is a hoax, are thinking that, schools are either doing too much or not enough. I know I can speak from my profession as a school nurse. School nurses are tasked with, implementing these public health mitigation strategies. And then, sometimes teachers think school nurses aren't doing enough if they're sending kids that they think are sick down to the isolation room. And the other issue is, if we need isolation rooms at school, should we really be in school? That's a separate issue. And then parents sometimes think that school nurses are doing too much, because we're following these guidelines that in some states, because nothing is standard. There has been no standard response. You could send a child home for 1 or 2 symptoms. So, you know, we have been put in a very, we're squeezed in the middle of this very complicated scenario. And I think I told you the other day, I mean, I had a school nurse told me that she feels safer at Trader Joe's than she does at school because they don't have PPE and they're not necessarily doing the mitigation strategies that we are supposed to be doing because people are COVID fatigued and the virus doesn't care. The virus will come back to us with a vengeance when we let our guard down. So, you know, we hats off to all the schools that have tried to reopen and then many have had to go hybrid again. I'm sorry, remote again. Because mostly of things that happen outside of school that impact school. You know, if you're a teacher that has to quarantine and then there are no subs, you know, the school has no choice sometimes but to close classrooms or close buildings. It's just been, you know, a revolving door of issues.
Thank you. Robin, I also wanted to thank you for addressing something that I think teachers aren't always thinking about, which is that nurses are often sandwiched between teachers, school staff, and parents. And you're often the messenger saying your child needs to quarantine for 2 weeks. And I just want to say thank you, because that's something that I hadn't thought of from my perspective. So I think that's why it's so important that we're having these conversations so we can all be allies and hopefully bring the parents in too. I mean, I like to think big, but Courtney, you are in a situation that many teachers are in right now, which is that you are in a school. And I have 2 questions for you. Do you think, generally speaking, schools are safe based on your experience and other teachers and school staff you know? And then, and you can answer this if you want, do you feel safe?
I think that is school safe is a complicated question to answer. I feel that our students are safe with us, but as far as their health safety, that's a different scenario. And if we're going to be honest, I'm going to say no. The reason being is because, especially I work in an urban district, so I can't speak for suburban or rural districts, but in my district in particular, our buildings are a lot older. So we're using air filtration systems to circulate good air into the classrooms. But in the beginning, we were not using that. We were using box fans in our windows. And if you're familiar with anything with Rhode Island weather, today it's 20 degrees. So if we were in school today, thankfully we're remote as of the last 4 days. If we were in school today, our kids would be in a classroom with a box fan blowing 20-degree air into the classroom. So, I think that safety, that's a difficult question to answer. As far as to answer your other question, do I feel safe? I can honestly say no, I do not feel safe. It's hard to say that because for the last 18 years, no matter what the situations were with school safety, like I said, I live in the city, so there's a lot of things that happen in school. This is the most unsafe I've ever felt in a school.
I hear you.
Yeah. Rebekah?
Don't ask me. Ask her. Ask all of the teachers and staff in schools. If Courtney says it's not, then it's not.
Thank you for saying that. That's so powerful. And I know that
Courtney, I am so sorry. Like, I know I shouldn't say this, but I've been fighting to keep schools closed for the last few weeks, at least until next fall, because of what the data has been showing. But it is not working, and I'm giving it everything that I have, and you shouldn't have to go through that. You really shouldn't, and it's not fair. And I'm so sorry that you feel like that. And I wish there was more that people like me could do, but everybody's so concentrated on police coming into my house that they forget that there's an entire world suffering right now.
I just got
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, Courtney, yeah, I've been really loud about it on Twitter and with all my friends, all the parents, the ones who don't want to hear it. And it's because I think of you and me and Robin and all the other people in these school communities who are telling me they don't feel safe. And Rebekah, like when I started seeing, I knew about what you were doing before all the, sensationalistic news. I thought what you were doing before that was far more interesting. And I just want to thank you because we all see what you're doing, and parents too. There are many parents who also agree, who don't feel safe with their kids in school. So I just want to say that don't feel like what you're doing because you're not achieving 100% your goal. It's breaking through. And I know that Courtney and Robin and I and all the teachers and school staff that were in that meeting tonight are so appreciative of your work. And this ties into what you just said, ties into my question, which is everyone looks at you as this really strong person standing up for what's right, and you're just another person, right? You're just another person, and you just are someone who is a scientist who happened to be propelled into this national spotlight, doing your job and doing what is right. And so, that being said, what advice do you have for all the people in our meeting tonight and all the teachers that have been in these other meetings that PBS NewsHour Extra has been conducting, who have been trying to stand up for truth and justice?
If you keep pushing and you're loud and you're vocal, and not just with people who agree with you, like if you have family who disagrees with you, be loud, share widely. That's really all that you can do. There are a lot of reasons why I am in this position. A lot of them have to do with the way that I look. And that's unfortunately not something that people can just achieve, instantly. I'm a pretty young white girl. And I had this horrible thing happen to me. And a lot of white people saw it and they were like, oh my God, that happens to us too. And they were outraged. And that's a totally unfair and shouldn't be the situation in which somebody who's been doing research gets their word out. But I'm certainly not going to ask you to go get rated and record it so that you can get your 5 seconds to tell people about what's happening, because it was awful. And I'm sure my son, who's 11, this is going to be something he's going to have to deal with his whole life, having guns pointed at him like that. That's actually more private and personal, but it's not fair that I've gained this spotlight. It's not fair to all the researchers who, have been in the muck. It's not fair to the ER doctors who, don't ever sleep. It's not fair to the teachers who every time a student coughs feel like that's it, it's done. But the media is a weird thing, and it goes for certain stories, and they latched on me, and that's just what happened. But I think, honest to God, if you just keep being loud, if those voices keep being heard, that's the most important thing. Because when they weren't, there was no one speaking up. There was no counter narrative, and it's more important than ever that the experiences that people are going through are made public, as much as people are comfortable with. Keep pushing, because there are people who are capable of empathy. And I think even if they don't understand the data or the latest research, and you're saying, what, this is my 3rd round on quarantine and my kids aren't learning anything because they're switching back and forth, and they understand that. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that's captured in data anywhere. Nobody's capturing that. That's not something I can capture. And that's the really important stuff to experience. And I don't have that to share. So it's really important that other people do.
Great. Thank you for just everything you just said. And I think it's so important. I love that you just said one of the reasons, the main reason that people latched onto you is how you look. But guess what? you're using that for good. And you now know Courtney's story, you know Robin's story, you know everyone's story in that room. And I know that even if you get 2 minutes to talk, that's going to come out in what you're saying to the media. And we're all so appreciative. And I see Courtney shaking her head. I don't know if Courtney, you want to say anything really quickly or?
I don't even know if I have the words, but Rebekah, I have to say thank you so much, because you're using your voice, and I hate to use this word, but your privilege to get the word out there, because a lot of us have been screaming and we've been just cast to the side, you know. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the data that you're just spewing out to everybody, because it's being suppressed. Like, we
I
don't
slipped some numbers in there. I'm pretty tricky with that. I slip a number in there.
but you know what? We don't get that information, and I can't find another word outside of appreciate. But if you could find another word, take that, and that's what I mean.
Thank you so much. And I think that my biggest takeaway is just the importance of community. It's the importance of a nurse, a history teacher, a paraprofessional, and every other hat you wear, Courtney, and a scientist coming together. It sounds like a joke. Like, it sounds like that walk into a room. I won't say bar, but you know, that's usually the joke.
It sounds like my family. My
Yes.
sister is a teacher. The other one is an ER nurse. My dad is a truck driver.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah,
that's America. That's families,
that's
you know?
family. Yeah. And so I think that's awesome. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's like, we need to start really truly working as a family, as a community together, sharing our knowledge. And like, Courtney's story will be in your mind tonight when you talk about the data, and she's going to watch you and be like, that's because of my story. I feel that 30 seconds. I just want to thank all three of you for being such amazing guests. And you could tell that there were so many other questions, but you addressed so many concerns tonight, and it's really important that we all work together. That's the takeaway. We all need to work together with the data, with the stories, and with everything else that we're experiencing. And I'm hoping that we kind of shift the narrative and really start talking about what's really happening at schools and how people are feeling. So thank you so much.